Thanks again for being here. If you missed it, I came on earlier to introduce myself. My name is Janelle Hazard. I'm the Executive Director at TEFRA Institute of Contemporary Art. Thank you so much for joining us today for the closing program for Between a Rock and a Soft Place. I feel that we have some new visitors here today. Is that right? Is anyone new to TEFRA? A couple of people are new. Okay, so I'll provide just really short background on who we are. We were founded in 1974 as Greater Reston Art Center. We rebranded in January 2021, reintroducing ourselves and repositioning the institution as TEFRA Institute of Contemporary Art. And the reasoning behind that rebranding is really to catch up our name with what we were presenting as an institution. So the artists that we were presenting nationally, the success that we were receiving between press and just great relationships and partnerships amongst museums like Phillips Collection, the National Museum of Women in the Arts, and many others. And so the name itself allowed us to expand our identity past Reston, although Reston's very important to us. We were founded by Reston artists and Reston residents, and so Reston will always be our home. However, we do have, which we're really proud of, excited about, more of an increasing national and international presence in the arts. The word TEFRA was decided upon in partnership with many community members, our stakeholders, our partners. The word itself represents matter that's erupted from a volcano. It lands upon the ground, it nourishes the ground, it produces fertile soil and crops. And the board and the staff at that time really saw synergy in what the arts provides for the community. So that combustibility of creativity, that nourishment, that regeneration of ideas and perspectives are all things that are very much in line with what we do as an institution and what we aim to do. So I'm excited to introduce the program. I think before we introduce the program, it would be great to bring up our associate curator, Hannah Barco, who helped facilitate this exhibition. And she'll soon introduce the guest curator of the show. So I'll step out and allow Hannah to hop in.
Taking my time there so I don't just knock everything down. Thank you again, all of you, for being here. As an introduction, I just want to share that this exhibition, Between a Rock and a Soft Place, was guest curated by Deirdre Darden, who's here with us tonight, as well as 2 of the 5 participating artists are also in our audience. You can decide to out yourself or not. Okay, Katie and Adjoa are here with us. And this exhibition is part of a biennial program called the Mary B. Howard Invitational. Mary B. Howard was an artist, a Reston resident, a board member, and a longtime supporter of TEFRA ICA, formerly Grace. And her contribution to the organization allows us to continue what was part of our founding mission, which is to support regional artists. The form of the program is that every 2 years we invite a guest curator from the area to develop an open call, which goes out for regional artists. We define that as the DMV. And then we select 5 artists and work with them in the creation of new work while in conversation with that guest curator. So I'll just share that one of the wonderful things that Deirdre put out there in the making of this show that brought many applications in and then allowed us to select these 5 artists were the following 2 questions. What would your artwork look like if you were well rested? How could you conceive of your practice if all of your needs were met? And the incredible nuance and positioned focus and set of ideas that the artists brought to responding to those prompts allowed them to be a part of this conversation and making new work and having it presented under Deirdre's care for this show. So feel free to ask myself or Deirdre if you have any other questions or the artists themselves. And I'll invite Janelle back up here to introduce our guest speaker. No.
Okay.
I'm new, so maybe say after.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. So the name of the program series we have today is Insights. Insights essentially is a series that allows us to invite people who are either academics in the field, art historians, conservators, curators, professors that really have a tie to the arts, and they provide a different perspective, their own unique perspective on the work on view. We love this idea of a program because it allows the audience to learn from a different lens. So not only through the exhibition text and the curatorial work that we do ourselves, but also through someone who's having a fresh sort of set of eyes on the work. So really excited for you to be here for this program. I'll take a few minutes to introduce our guest for tonight. Socially engaged artist and curator Mēlani N. Douglas is the Director of Public Programs at the National Museum of Women in the Arts and the founder of the award-winning Family Arts Museum, a migratory institution focused on the celebration of family as fine art, home as a curated practice, and community as gallery. Mēlani's art and life practice is rooted in the rituals and informed by mitochondrial memories, ancestral technology, the web of interdependency, and communal connections. She was recently named East of the River Artist in Residence in Washington, D.C., and her work has been highlighted by the New York Times, Atlas Obscura, Shondaland, Be More Art, American Museum Alliance Youth Magazine, Baltimore Magazine, ArtNet, and National Geographic. Please join me in welcoming Mēlani Douglas.
So we're gonna go on a journey together. And I wanna first share one thing that I did with you all. And then I'll get into the talk, but there is something that I feel, since I speak very little about the work that I'm doing at the National Museum of Women in the Arts at this talk, I wanted to give you an idea. So at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, I'm the Director of Public Programs, as was said. And what I was invited to apply because of my work at the Family Arts Museum. And so what I wanted to do is to make the Public Programs Department to create as many avenues for artists to get into the museum as possible. The museum can be a very guarded place and a very unknown place. So how do you go inside and kind of create these channels and out to the outside? So I wanted to share one part of a program that I did called Adorning Wakanda. We had Dorian Fletcher, the jewelry maker from Wakanda, who did the jewelry, in conversation with Ayanna Llewellyn, who is a Black archaeologist and diver who swims underneath to find adornment on slave ships. And also in conversation with Maya Nuka, who is the curator of Asiatic jewelry at, I think it's the Brooklyn Museum, I might be wrong with that. But at the beginning of it, we had a ritual of the space. And so what happens is a lot of times when you go into these spaces, people don't always talk about the energetic element, right, that you have to contend with. So there's this historical element, there's this generational element, and there's an energetic element. And it takes a level of, I don't know whether to call it bravery, I think sometimes I'll call it insanity, to walk into that space and bring your rituals and your ancestors with you and let it be what it will be. So I am going to play this. There's something else happening in the background, so let me take care of that first. You guys will. Fela Kuti, of course. Why not? Right? If you're gonna do it, might as well be Fela. But it lets me know that you guys can at least hear. Turn this down. So this is a way that I typically would open an event. That happened. So before bondage stretched canvases, and before museum walls, before monuments of marble and bronze, there was the body. There was a woman's body, scientific name AL288-1. Several hundred pieces of bone fossils representing 40% of the skeleton of a female of the hominin species, and I'm going to say this wrong, Australopithecus afarensis, often referred to as Sufi, but her proper name is Dinkadesh, which means you are marvelous in the Amharic language, Amharic. The language of Ethiopia, original cradle of humanity, where the oldest bodies of that body were found. The oldest bones of that body were found. Now, can you imagine who she was and what she did? Just think of how she mirrored nature to learn how to be on this plane. Did her spirit marvel at the red moons from the sky? What did she do when those first berries and other fruits stained her fingers? Did she like it? Was that the moment that was the mother of henna, rouge, lipstick? What did she do with the feathers of a fallen bird? Did she mourn and honor its life by adorning her head and creating in her own room? Did she need one to see her and inspire her to decorate this first canvas of her body? Or did she do it for herself? Her world, an adornment playground with colors, leaves, feathers, shells, and more. Is this where the armor of the Dora Milaje was born? Did she ever imagine that her playwork would play a starring role in the biggest film of one of our times? That her exploration of the world would compel curators to create exhibitions on jewelry and adornment? That her bones would spark the imagination of women archaeologists working in the Caribbean, underwater, looking for traces of how her play became a discovery that became rituals and tradition? Is she dreaming of us now from the other side and watching the hands of Dorian Fletcher, of Maya Nuku, of Ayana Llewellyn, and all of her daughters and sons? We may never know. But tonight, through a conversation between Dorian Fletcher, who is Marvel Comics' first licensed jewelry designer, who created a power-packed accessory for the blockbuster film Black Panther, the Afrofuturist inspired design propelled audiences into the world where power and gender roles were based on expertise and ability. Through Dr. Ayana Llewellyn, UC's president and postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, and co-director of the Estate Little Princess Archaeology Project. And through Maya Nuku, the Evelyn H. Hall, and the John Freed Associate Curator of Ocean Art at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Our traditions of adornment and accept our power in honor of the Ganesh, of Ruth Carter, of Jenny Wamoja, of Loma Picasso, Thea Miller, Yocheved Warklu, Ganesh. You are marvelous. You are marvelous. You are marvelous. Thank you. Thank you. Let me get this back. And we'll go back to this right here. I'm gonna stand over here for the moment. I think I'll still be here, right? So here, what I have very much enjoyed about this exhibition is that it encapsulates a lot of where I am right now in life, and also what I would love to share about what I've learned about life. And I think that when you go into an art exhibition, you always want to bring yourself, you know? There's this sometimes idea, depending on how it's taught or what your experience is, that it's this, that you are not in the work, right? But you are always in the work. You're always in the work. So when you take your time and you allow yourself to sit, come see the exhibition a few times, compare it to what you're reading, bring your music, you know, bring something that smells good, you know, something that is familiar to you, bring yourself into it, and I promise you, you will find yourself. I love the title, Between a Rock and a Soft Place. What a beautiful title, right? Because what I've learned about life is that the rock is always there. The hard place is always there. The option for you is whether or not you choose to be the rock or the hard place, or you create something different, right? The only option is to be the soft space, to be the pliable, to be the moving, the flexible, right? To be the water that turns rocks into sand. or you could be the rock, or you could be the hard place. Now, the rock and the hard place are tools that you want to keep in your back pocket, because in a society that doesn't understand and appreciate softness, unfortunately, you have to position yourself to defend it. One thing that I learned as a young woman growing up in Baltimore, with an older brother, there were times that you realized very quickly that if you wanted to hold on and maintain your soft space, you actually had to learn to fight. Wild, right? But you had to defend whatever you wanted to be. And so there had to be some sort of resistance to what was in order for there to be room for what you were willing to be. And it's very interesting raising a daughter and trying to raise her to understand that whatever you want is yours, and you have to know when to be that soft space, when to be that rock, and when to be that hard spot, because it makes it all possible. So I love that in the title, and I love that question of rest, because one of the hardest lessons in the society is to learn that the soft space requires some sleep, requires to drain. And a lot of times you may come to an art exhibition, and if you're not sleeping and attached to your dream world, it's very hard to connect to the dream space of artists and the dream space of the beyond, the eternal now, as I refer to it. Can you go to the next one? I created the Family Arts Museum because I was in, emojis, hi. Okay, fine. Thank you. Go to the next slide. I created the Family Arts Museum, and I'll tell you how I get there, but the values of the Family Arts Museum is family as fine art, home as curated space, community as gallery. And I wanted to start with the piece that I shared because I think it's very important for you to understand that you existed before all of this, and all of this does not exist without you. There is no art world and no art gallery without you. It just is not. So a lot of times when artists are coming to me and trying to figure out how to quote unquote break in, my question is, how do we break you out? That's the real question. Break that part of you that thinks you're separate from creation out. This is created because, as I spoke about, someone had maybe berries on their fingers. Somebody saw red for the first time and didn't even call it red. This is all created way before collectors, before galleries, before trade, all of this stuff. The beauty that was created by the human spirit, it evolved into something that had to be captured. And so you have to understand that any market that you see, any art world that you see, there is something so beautiful that was before it, that it had to be captured and defined and sometimes commodified, right? Because somebody had to hold it. Somebody had to, which is a more Western concept. And so you have to figure out how you want to wrestle with that, okay? So I want to give you a little background about me. I could not, well, go to the next one. I come from loving parents. I am definitely a daddy's girl. And just like my daughter, I was up under my mama. I was raised in a jazz club. My first memories are Sun Ra, Bradford and Wynton Marsalis playing together. My mother cooked in the kitchen of the jazz, Left Bank Jazz Society in Baltimore. My father made barbecue sauce. We had people calling our house, the jazz musicians, trying to get that sauce. So I grew up with my first memory of that Sun Ra moment is literally being at the top of the stairs and just seeing clouds of metal and color and just being submersed inside of it. And as a child in a jazz club, they do what they do with children in jazz clubs. You just get grabbed into the Sun Ra parade. You end up on stage, you end up backstage, you end up wherever you are because it's Sunday and that's how we had our church. That's how we convened. My dad is a brilliant man, one of the few left and right brain people that I know. I have a soft spot for brilliant men, so I think that keeps me out of trouble. Brilliant, nice man. So he's such a sweetheart. He's brilliant, and I don't think he would call himself a feminist, but he ended every prayer, amen, and all of the good women, right? Every prayer. It doesn't matter where you are, that's how he ended it. And if somebody forgot, he would add it for them. He celebrated his ideas of teaching me about women, or his view of women, his beauties were my mama, who looks like this till this day. Mae Jameson, Grace Jones, and Shaka Khan. So I never was under the impression that this was not fabulous, absolutely extravagant and marvelous and brilliant. We spent a lot of time in libraries, in all of the art spaces, and we listened to a lot of music. They moved back tables to dance on Fridays. And they also have such a sweet relation. They have a very, it's just, you just have to witness it. I can't explain it. They have a very beautiful relationship. But what I learned about them both in relating to people is allow room for people to be who they are. And again, see yourself inside of everything, even inside of these relationships. My mom is an herbalist supreme. She can tell you about any herb, fix anything. I would probably say that from my mom's side, we're probably the third or fourth generation, maybe fifth generation herbalist that I know. From my dad's side, working with the herbs, go back as far as they can. And they're still together. We just saw them yesterday. They ate all the red velvet cake. She baked the cake. And so that kind of environment where there was never a separation of art and flow. You can go to the next one. I come from friends who dance, we party, we play kickball, and I think we're playing hopscotch. Is it hopscotch?
It looks like it.
I know we were playing dodgeball that day, and then we were playing something else. And then we're just dancing. We don't even know, we don't even know how we got there, but going to poetry, reading, road trips. And then we always have intergenerational, this is Nana Shashidi, who is there with us at King's Dominion. So we would always drag our elders out to the roller coasters and the dance parties. And that's just how we operate. You can go to the next one. And this made me really think about Holly Baxter's work, the luxurious work of getting back to life. And a playlist that I have for you all, it opens up with the song Back to Life. And it sounds so exciting, the two songs that I chose for her. Oh, it sounds like a party. But if you're anything like me, when you get a chance to rest, oh, it can be a party. Like you feel this excitement in your body. And just to be able to lay yourself down. And you really want to add something special to it. If you had the chance to tell somebody, you know what, no, I won't make it. I'm not gonna be there tonight. And then you go lay down. I don't know why that adds a little layer of something special. Like, I'm not going. I don't know, the FOMO. I hear people talk about it. I'm like, no, baby, I don't have it. And so to see her laying very luxuriously, and it looks like she might have been ready to go somewhere. Like she might have, had the flowers ready. The dress is cute, it's comfortable. See, these are the magic dresses. When you have the comfortable dress that you can then go lay down in, that's a good dress. And it is just as is, and it was almost as you get to the door and you say, you know what? No, I'm gonna take a nap. And I'm gonna let it be what it's gonna be. And if you want to add another layer to it, people who love you and be like, you know what, you should take a nap, because they know how much you do. So it made me think about, this work made me think about when I was pregnant. I had the most luxurious pregnancy ever. I had actually got laid off pregnant. And I know that sounds like, it's like, that's not bad. Well, I got laid off and I was teaching adult education and I was getting students to get their GEDs. And so they laid me off because I was the last hire, but then the scores went down because I had fun teaching the students. Actually, one of my students is here from the 6th grade. I haven't seen her in 21 years. And so she came tonight because she saw my picture and we were talking about how much fun we used to have. Oh my God, we had so much fun in the classroom. And so what happened is that after I got laid off, fired, whatever, the scores went down. They said, well, we're gonna close. Can you come back? And can you just close us out with high scores? I said, yeah, but it's gonna cost you, you know? And so then I got to actually do the job for half day, but like twice as much money. So it was great. So I was pregnant and I was able to have, and then afterwards I had enough money that I could actually take off and do something that my parents, my mom, I can't even imagine if my mom ever got a chance to take as much time to just be pregnant. And then also afterwards, I got to stay home with her for a year and a half. You can go to the next slide. And so this time period of just being a mom, and she was right on my back, and we just did all the things. It really shaped the practice of creating the Family Arts Museum. But I think that it was only because I was in a state of rest and dreaming and allowing things to be that I actually could do that. And so seeing Holly just laid out on that couch, it's like, allow people to dream. Allow yourself to dream, allow yourself to wake up and sometimes rest again. Allow yourself to, even today, I had the computer right next to me and I just would go right back to sleep and just be like, okay, to access a dream world. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna talk about? What are you open to? You can go to the next slide. And in that dreaming, I was able to really transfer some of the things that I wanted to transfer to my daughter that you can only do from a space of rest. Even though I did decide to go back to grad school when she was 18 months old, once again, the insanity is a part of the dream state. So I was in grad school still nursing and doing all the things, but she had her tricycle, everybody accepted, Micah made room, I had a nursing, they took care of me, I took care of grad school, she came to symposiums with me, I think symposium was probably one of your 5th or 6th words, so. But to have to spend time with, elders, like Mama Paula, to be able to make dolls with her, to be able to, go to the Sam Gilliam studio, probably twice a year and be able to just wow out. I don't know, I'm surprised at what you do. And create work with him, to work with Mama Jenniwa and Baba Ezekiel and have those ancestral connections. But it wasn't just for her, it was also just for me. So when you're in that place of rest and you're not allowing the world to make you hard, you can give in a way that gives to you. And so that's how you are able to sustain that. To me, that is the only way that motherhood is sustainable. Go to the next slide. You did have a long hair. So this is why she's sitting right next to me right now, because at every point that has been kind of a part of what we did. Go to the next slide. This is a sample of my photography, and I put this because this is what I had decided to. I got accepted to Micah for photography, for Mount Royal, and then curatorial practice. I decided to do curatorial practice. You can go to the next slide. So, Deborah Grayson, what I love about her pieces, in your playlist, there's a song that's Hush Now, Don't Explain. When you go into art school, such an interesting place. You have to explain your work. There's all this talk about your work. You got to talk about it. You got to talk. But at some point, you have to just not explain. Talk until you don't need to explain anymore. There has to be that point. And you hear something behind you that says, no, hush now, don't explain. Because you're going to get to something you believe in, that you know to be true. And people are gonna say, that's crazy. Well, it is crazy, you know, a lot of things are crazy, but they're only crazy because they didn't exist before. Don't explain it. When you get to that point that you have talked yourself in and out of your work, and don't get me wrong, you gotta don't just go in there quiet to begin with. I didn't say that. Get to the point where you're like, you know what? I'm not explaining that. I'm gonna do this work. I'm going to get in it. I'm going to let it speak to me. I'm going to be challenged by it. I think I'm crazy too, actually, if you want to be honest. I mean, I think I'm actually have lost my mind, but here we are. And so you want me to explain things I can't. And so I remember being at that point in art school for curatorial practice, we had to go to these different institutions and you had to get get a partner, right, for a museum so you could curate an exhibition. And a lot of things happened. First of all, the parking to the museums was crazy. Second of all, if I'm bringing my child, I couldn't bring the child because the meeting, there was no place for the child to run. And then if I go, and then the food was, I don't know, who prices museum food? I'm a grad student, you know what I'm saying? It just was very expensive and it was just seemed so far from my space. And I said, you know what? I can't do this for the rest of my life as a curator. I cannot constantly go to someone and try to explain to them what I want to do and get them on board with me. I'm not going to do it anymore. So I just started the Family Arts Museum. And I said, you know what? Family Arts Museum, because another thing I wanted to talk about was my practice as a mother and how I wanted my art practice to be one. And people were like, well, that's just something maybe you could do after you do a few shows. I was like, no, this is the show. I am in the middle of grad school raising a child. If you don't want to call it art, I don't know what to tell you, right? So I love in Deborah Grayson's work how there's just so much that's just not going to be explained. If you know, you know. And there's a lot in her work that I know. And there's a lot in her work that people maybe don't know. And it just might not be your business. And that's how you have to get with your work sometimes. Everybody's not going to be there with you. And it just might not be their business. But for the person who it is their business, they are with you. Go to the next one. You say what? I love this picture because there are all these moments that you feel like you walked in and out of an insane asylum. And there's these parts inside of walking and navigating in the art world that you have to be super careful about your mental state. Here's the thing. You do have to allow yourself to go a little bit crazy, because I don't know if anybody will tell you this, but what people are calling sane is actually a little bit crazy. So you have to say, you know what? And this, what you're calling sane, actually no. And you might look crazy, you might feel crazy, but there is a knowing. What I love about this piece is that this person knows something about you that you don't even know about yourself. There's a staring into and through that is like, you're looking at them like they're unkept. They're looking at you like you're unknown to yourself. And I don't know, I think I'd rather be unkept than unknown to myself. This person knows who they are. They know exactly who they are. You may not. And they're looking at you and they know you don't know. And that's why we don't want to look at them. And I love that. And this, when I saw this, when I came into the gallery event, I was like, whoo, okay. I know you see it. Yes, you're right, you're right. I am going through some parts of getting back to a knowing. What's in my phone? So the crazy idea that I had was to start a series of art shows again that were about creating peace in Baltimore. I never said that. I never said that Love on the Line was about peace in Baltimore. I never mentioned anti-violence, but what you had to do, and I chose the laundromat because I was reading a book called Women's Work. In 1977, they organized a laundromat show. And you brought your clothes to the laundromat, you put your clothes in the washer, then they had a play for while the clothes washed. And then at intermission, you put your clothes in the dryer and you talk to some people, you started the dryers, and then they did the second part of the play. I said, these are my girls. right? So the laundromat has this long tradition of socially engaged art, which is why, as a person who believes you honor what came before, I started the laundromat. There's a great project up in New York called the Laundromat Project. If you get into it, you'll begin to see these different spaces. But at the time in Baltimore, definitely are some people who thought it was a little bit crazy. Miss Penny was the person who folds the clothes at the laundromat. She was our lead sculptress. Because I don't know if you've ever tried to fold a fitted sheet into a perfect square. I can tell you, she has some skills. So she actually did a folding workshop. We had the students from Excel Academy with their work. You can go to the next piece. In order to go to the laundromat performances, you can see the art in the background and on the screen. In order to come to the show, you had to bring a love letter to Baltimore. You had to bring laundry to wash, because that's the rules of the space. Like, we washing clothes. So, and also I was in grad school. I needed to be able to wash clothes while I was getting my work done. So, I didn't want to be alone in this. So, and when you came in, I gave you 4 quarters and 2 dryer sheets and some laundry pods. I wasn't as environmentally conscious as I am right now, but that's what we had. Go to the next slide. So with the second one we did after the Freddie Gray uprising, we had capoeira in the laundromat. We had a therapist that was on board. And so the therapist, you could take 20-minute appointments just to find out what therapy was about. In 2015, the conversations we're having around therapy was not happening in the Black community. They were not happening. So even for a person just to sit, and they would come and the therapist would be sitting where you are and they'd be sitting over here like, so what is it that you do? And like, but you had a moment to just even meet a therapist. We had someone go to the next one. We had a breathing meditation that was done in the laundromat. And what happened is that there were a lot of protest parades. And so what I agreed is that one of the protest parades, I invited them to come to the laundromat show, and that we would have a culture of care for the participants after the show. This is some of the art from the students. These are examples of the love letters that people wrote. I had pictures of pants and shirts. And so I had an artist that I really wanted to be in the show, and they came with their managers. They had a different name, and so when they came, I said, oh, well, can you meet me at the laundromat on Howard and North Avenue? They said, oh yeah, I'll meet you at the laundromat. That sounds. And so they got there and they walked in, and their agent was like, oh, this is really a laundromat. And I was like, yeah. She said, I thought it was going to be like a new spot. And I said, no, it's really a laundromat. And she looked at her artist and said, oh, I'll meet you in the car, and just was done with me in this show. Did not want to participate. And as a matter of fact, the artist showed up just to see me fail. And they told me, they said, I just wanted to see this fail because, because no artist is really nobody's gonna come. I thought that was a beautiful experience, and 125 people came to the first show. Everybody had bags of laundry, but not only did people come, gallery owners came. The director of the Baltimore Museum of Arts came. Like, everybody that you probably wanted to meet was in the laundromat that day. The librarians from the like Johns Hopkins and Micah and all the museums, people came out because George was there. George Sissel was there, who was my mentor. So it ended up actually being this place. So people will think you are crazy, right? But then people start following crazy and they have a good time. So we had a great time, and they actually ended up having a great time too, and apologized for their presentation. Go ahead. And that's how the Family Arts Museum was born. Go ahead. Audra, hey. For the audience on Zoom, the one and only is here. And so the song that I chose for Audra's work is You Got a Right to the Tree of Life. There's a tradition called the ring shout. And the ring shout is, some would call we'll call it an African spiritual tradition, some associated with voodoo. There's different ways to. But what happens is that I love and was taken aback to how this work pulls you and reminds you of your relationship with the land, your relationship with the earth. And that this is yours, right? That this is your place to be. A lot of times what happens in African American culture is that we are stripped from something, somebody repackages it, and then they sell it back to us. So we've been preserving since the dawn of time. So how are you gonna tell me that I'm supposed to pay $20, $50 for mason jars when I probably taught your family how to preserve something? It's just beyond my ears. But the language inside of it, this invitation, what I love about this piece is this invitation to go into the hiding spaces of the earth, go into the places that fold into themselves. And in where I am working at a nonprofit, working at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, and a lot of times you get into a space and you're like, you're going to create something new, and you create the newness and you create it. You got to be careful. And once again, you hit these points, the rock, the hard place, and the soft place. And it will take you somewhere, right? And you have to say, where am I going to be inside of this? So my practice deals with herbalism, and my house looks like an apothecary. Anybody who's been there, it is an apothecary. She should know, she labeled some of the chakras. And actually her and her friends are about to have an herbalism training so that they can run the apothecary. And so, you can go to the next. There is so much conversation in the details, right? In conversation with my friend Michael Carter, who is a farmer. We'll talk about his work later. He talks about God is in the details. And I do believe that God is in the details, in the looking and the knowing and the things that we often step on or over, right? And so there's an interesting thing that happens when you start to look at the details of other things. You can get an unlocking to the details of yourself. So if you ever feel lost and you ever feel like you're not knowing, stop, pause, and look at the details of things, right? Go ahead to the next one. So this was the beginning, this was the pandemic. You can see, this is just some of the herbs and the pot and the papers and all of that, and this dandelion, a beautiful artist, Joy, I collect the work. And so she's, showing, that's just how it was, and my daughter knows this is a typical Saturday at the house. You can go typical week. But with that, I love her comment there. So with that, is that this is at my brain is somewhere, so I'll go to it. But what we're doing is that we had herbs that were laid out on the table, and you could come and make pictures with the herbs. You can smell the herbs. This was pre-COVID, so all the kids were picking up the herbs, smelling the herbs, rubbing them in their hands, and they were telling stories, and they had to draw the stories out of the plate. As you can tell, they were very into this, and they also were they had to go get stories from their families and bring them back. I'll go back. And then their plates and their stories were played back to them over dinner. So we worked with the playback theater. So the theater then told the stories and would reenact their stories off of their plates over dinner. So they got a chance to see all of these actors tell their family stories around food. So these are the kind of programs, or that's my art practice and how I like to kind of bring all of that together. This is our pandemic learning station where we got back to sewing and, just getting inside of like the details. And it was such an interesting time because when you're in that rush world, there's so many things that you don't get to share because you're in traffic. You know what I mean? So you just don't get a chance to share it. Go ahead. And, this is supposed to be a different song, excuse me, but that brings me to Katie's work, and it talks about how in this time period of the pandemic of being in this space of first this like initial like loneliness, like this like the world must be cut off. And then how there was this levels of resistance to it and levels of acceptance to it. So eventually you ended up in a pod, they called it a pod, right? But there had to be someone, there had to be something, there had to be this, our nature is that someone else is there. Even in the beginning, sometimes that someone was you, your own self calling you up into the moment, your own self finding new ways. And the levels to it, the levels of being, maybe I'll get up, maybe I'm completely exhausted. I wonder with somebody else, how this is for someone else. Should I be sleeping? Should I be resting? Should I be doing? Then you had all the things that were this rush to get something done during the pandemic. You got to learn something, you got to do something. And then another group that was like, you actually just need to rest. Like, does anybody realize this world is not working for us? And I don't know if anybody remembers right before the pandemic, but it was insane. The level of busyness that we were collectively experiencing. Maybe it was just me. Is anybody else remember this?
Yeah.
It was wild. I mean, the get up, the get to school, the this, the that. I mean, it was nonstop. Now, there were a lot of opportunities inside of it, but I didn't think we were gonna live long enough to experience any of the opportunities because we were dying. Collectively, we were not going to make it. And there was a very hard moment where people had to let some of that old world go. And it's interesting to see how some of us rush back to it and some of us are refusing it. And so, but what it did do is that it created a tension that we needed. We needed attention, something to push and pull and shake us up a bit, right? And so this work reminds me of that pushing and that pulling of the inner self. But it also reminds me of the pushing and pulling that happens in my beautiful relationships with the women in my life. That it's like, girl, you need to lay down. Girl, you need to get up. Girl, come on now. Like, you know, that there's somebody that's always speaking to you, speaking life into you, speaking life through you. So this is a group of women known as the Baltimore Girls. This is Safiatu. This is Tracy. This is Erica. This is Emily. And when I was in Baltimore, crazy in grad school with an 18-month-old, these are the women that would conjure with me, that we would conjure together, that would pull you into their conjuring. Safiatu does this beautiful project she did called Baltimore Girls. She's now going into like, amazing opera that she's doing. Erica is running the Baltimore Peace Movement, known as the Baltimore Peace Fire. Tracy has an amazing theater project that she's doing. Latoya is a phenomenal hair artist. LNG is the spirit and anchor. And so when you have that, what we did is we went into the Walters Art Museum. I had a class and it was empty that day. And we just cut up completely. I mean, we had bodies painted that you can see, Safiatu did all of this. And then we did a performance on the stage. Now, mind you, we were supposed to only be on the stage, but that's not what happened. So we literally just went into the space of this old building, of this really activating our bodies. These are the kind of buildings that Black women's bodies immediately feel this tension. And you're like, I don't know why I'm so tense. And we allow our bodies to move through it and reclaim what the energy of that space gets to be for any other woman's body who comes through here. Because here's what we know. If a Black woman's body is free in that space, I can promise you anybody else's body will be free. That's going to happen. So if you can allow yourself to, if we go into the space to liberate, we understand there's liberation for everybody else. Why? Because, well, ours are the most confined. So if you go to the fringe and center, as Mother Tony says, you can deal with some of this. This is us on stage. And so this made me think of the pieces, and I didn't have it with the 3 women. Yes, that did show with the women and how there's this layering and this calling inside of your work that made me think of this moment. And this is us just conjuring on the stage. And bringing some of that conjure into the National Museum of Women in the Arts, bringing it into a space where a lot of women of color's work is not collective. And there's a lot of moves to make that happen. But sometimes you have to, when you go into these spaces, you have to bring up, like I said, a level of insanity and boldness. This was a adornment ritual that was created by Ritz Cat. I think it was. And so we had literally where, you know, Ritz Cat, right? Yeah. We had literally where she had us in a circle and we had all these, all of our adornment out. And we did something that people never get a chance to see. You're seeing this act of adorning each other, of adorning yourself, and really making it very public. Now, do you understand how it was interesting to let people know that they couldn't touch these women's things? That was such a fun adventure that day, because everybody thinks, you know, sometimes when, it's so interesting how somebody will not touch a piece of art. They are very clear. No matter how drunk they are, no matter how crazy off their rocker, they are not gonna touch that piece of art. Now, how is it that you think that you can touch my hair and my body? I am not clear. So we had to really set this space, almost like a power vortex. Like the clarity you have up in those galleries, get the same clarity down here. Because that kind of understanding that this is the original art, you are the original art, it demands a certain reverence, is the only kind of thing, in my opinion, that's going to change spaces. So you have to bring that. So the video that you saw where the women were being called into the circle to dance was after this. So we had the adornment ritual, then we had a drum circle, and people were called in to dance. And it was so interesting to watch how everybody's bodies moved. No one said that anybody could come into the circle, but who decided to exclude themselves? Who decided to include themselves? Where they decided to be? How they decided to choose to observe, to be. It was just this fascinating, you know, but as you go into wherever you make yourself be, you have to say, how am I inside of this and how do I bring more of space for everyone to be in?
Was everyone when we talked and they were talking about the healing?
No, that's not in here at all.
Oh,
The song that I picked for her was, it's not on the playlist because I couldn't get the version I wanted, was Crazy by Gnarls Barkley. Even your emotions have an echo. Such a beautiful line. And there's this, and I also picked, I think, Lauryn Hill Guarding the Gate. And what I love about, there's always that pulling back and forth. And also Here Comes a Thought. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that Steven Universe song. I don't have it on yet. Yeah. Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, you love Steven Universe. And so the song you heard coming in was a version of Crazy. But once again, no matter where you get and no matter how far you get and where you get inside of your practice, you are going to need a meditative practice. I don't know what world y'all looking at, but the world that I'm in and the one I'm looking at, you have to find something that will make you pause. For me, it's looking at art. I can come into an art space and I can take a moment, allow the piece to sit with the piece, people. Put your timer on your phone and at least get a good 7 minutes with the piece, at least. Don't allow yourself to just go past 3 minutes, then you're gone, right? So her work reminds you that yes, this echo is there for a reason. Take a moment to listen to it. Allow all the thoughts that come up. It's okay. Go to the next one, see. And go to the next one. So that brings me to a project that, another crazy project, Reclamation. And what came up when we had the pandemic hit and we had to go, we had literally a whole exhibition design. The pandemic hit and we had to make a decision. This was before everybody was willing to close down. And literally in 72 hours had to make up a whole other exhibition. Now, I don't know, all the curators in the room were like, you just could feel the body, like, like it was a collective, like, what did you just say? And I literally just had to go home and I think I slept the whole weekend and I just kept waking up and I would go back to sleep. And just like I would make some herbs, some tea, and just try to get myself into a state of dreaming and a state of stillness to see something else. And I'm gonna have to pull this up on here to make sure I'm doing good on time. There we go. So if you could show the audience at home this exhibition. So what I did was that I had asked 9 artists who, all different fields, and they were storytellers. That's all I wanted them to be. If you dance, if you were a chef, I need you to be able to tell a story. And I said, I need you to tell me the art that takes care of the artist, what's happening in your kitchen right now, right? So treat your kitchen like an art gallery and treat your kitchen table as the canvas and work from it. Show me what you're doing. Show me other things that are happening. And we had about 25 prompts. They had to show themselves sitting at the table, doing something besides eating. They had to show themselves sitting at the table with someone else. If you live by yourself, how you were dealing with loneliness. So there's all these prompts that led to these different videos. We had artists from as far as Korea, California. We had Maggie Pate, who all of her work, all of her art dealt with dealing with the scraps of food. And so she would use the scraps to make dyes. And so she would deal with fibers. This is Jenny Dorsey, and literally she's a chef. So she's showing how her practices of her family's traditional food. And because I felt like I saw the anxiety that it created for the artists. They were like, so you want me to what? And you're sending me a GoPro and you need me to do what? Is it gonna be on? And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it too, right? So I put myself through so that one's coming from our kitchen. And I did all the prompts that they did. Let me go if I can see. So you can, Thank you all for your patience. All right, so you enter the exhibition, and these are just some of the videos that people had. We can play one video. This is the day. And it was just really showing these very intimate moments of the home and spaces that we typically just would not see. Then Lauren Vanderpool, she's a vegan chef. So she's showing you how to make a sorbet. And I don't think I took a video. So Ashira is learning how to bake. And she was at the time during the pandemic Zooming with all the mothers and grandmothers. And so how these traditions continue, I'm sorry, I think if I don't want to speak about how these traditions continue, even in this moment where everything stops, these traditions, they continue, these questionings, they continue. Were you learning back then? So these are the recipes and remedies. Here's some of the rituals. This is my interviews with each artist. And this is at the kitchen table. I love how Sharena, she had a dinner party. So you have this time elapse of her pod and how they have someone on FaceTime coming in to be a part of the dinner party. And just looking at what were we doing with these spaces at that time period. And then because I don't care where I am, I need the public to be a part of it as well. We had a recipe archive. So you could submit to the recipe, you could submit to the exhibition. And you could submit your family's recipes, your family stories, videos. So we had over 150 submissions of recipes. So that immediately opened it up. So now we had like 159 artists inside of it, our started exhibition, which was great. And then we did, you want to do the top song that I couldn't do? We also had this thing for resources called the Curative Collective, which is now the name for the Curative Collective Teens, who are going to be tweens who are learning about the apothecary. And so we had Care for Creatives. This was a program by DC who was offering mental health resources for DC artists, Streaming Out Loud. They had food that they were given. The Fresh Food Factory, they did a demonstration. And so anything, DC Mutual Aid Apothecary, they were giving away tinctures. So anything that was dealing with any resource that people were giving at the time of the pandemic. You know, we wanted to share with our audience, share with artists. So how do we make sure that our art spaces are connecting to audience in the community that not only we quote unquote serve, but that we have a lot to learn from, right? And we also did, if I can do this. A project called The Tea. So the T is, the first T was Tamika Love Jones. And so literally, I was just trying to figure out, I'm always trying to figure out how to get people money. So that's just one of the things. So I was trying to figure out, okay, there are a lot of women artists right now at home and they don't have money. So how do we get the money? Okay, you know what? You're home. Let's start a music series in your kitchen. No problem. So we're literally gonna pay you to do a concert and stream it live from your kitchen. So I will play just a little, just so you guys can see it, what that will look like. And literally, yeah, that was before we painted the kitchen. And so literally, this is like what it literally was a concert. And so we had a series that has grown into a whole other thing, as you can see, once you see as it gets on Navasha data, she has a whole different experience. Now it's in a studio, you know, now we have Belladonna that's performing for March. It's like, oh, is that NPR? I was inspired by them. The little tiny desk. I was like, tiny kitchen, let's do it. So, let me get back to the exhibition. How are you guys feeling? Good. Good. All right, and so now I can tell you about the work that I'm working on now, and would love to invite you all to participate in it. So, in addition to being East of the River artist in residence, first, before I move on, I want to thank the artists for what you all gave in this show. And I want to thank Deidre for what you presented, the opportunity. What is such a beautiful time to do what you did. And it's and I appreciate the fact that everybody really showed up. Y'all showed up and showed out. Y'all did good. Y'all did a phenomenal job. And so thanks for stepping to the challenge. I was so excited that there was work that I saw on people's website. I'm doing research. So I saw people's work and I was like, oh, this is new. Like, this is exciting. So that was exciting. So thank you. It was a very healing part for me, for where I am and some of the transitions that I'm making. So I really appreciate the time that you all put and hope that you all understand that there's a conversation. And I'm glad to be a part of it. So how we gather is with the Washington Performing Arts. It's going to be at Eaton Hotel. I just found out Adrian Marie Brown's going to be part of it. It's going to be crazy. So we're doing these series of workshops at the Eaton Hotel. It's going to be March 30th, April 1st, and April 2nd. So the conversations that I'm doing on that Saturday is Conjuring for Kitchens, Dance Floors, and the Cosmos. I'm in conversation with Nzinga Tall, and she is how do you say this? She's an astro engineer. She's like an aerospace engineer. And so we're going to be talking about like what is the relationship? What do we have to learn from the cosmos and also from the past around Chandra, and how the sky has always been a place of liberation for Black people, how we have found liberation from following the stars from before. I want to get into the Dogon people who knew about Sirius B before Sirius B was Sirius B, and created their whole entire lineage around that. And so we're gonna have some fun with that. Go to the next one. Oh, go back one, please. So in the work that I'm moving into now, the terms that are going to be a consistent part of it, ancestral technology is what I'm looking at, and how we looking at the work of our ancestors as technology, as something that we can pull from, that we can solve the problems of today. And so we have this technology that we can hold in our hand, but there's an even more finite technology that we're holding in ourselves that we get to tap into, and how we tap into it. The importance of, like what Audra was doing with her work, getting like that reflection, finding yourself in nature, and taking the time to rest, which this whole exhibition is part. What did our ancestors do? There is Jessica Valora, she has a show up. Listen, it's only up for 7 more days. It's out in Rockville. And we were talking about her show, and she was talking about how Nat Turner literally took a month sabbatical. Like, and you think of like what were enslaved people doing, like how to make sure that their spirit was not enslaved. So this was a common practice, to take like a whole entire, like take time, and the understanding you would go back. People are like, well, why would you go back into slavery? Did you forget they have families there? Like, this is a whole complicated thing. Well, what would they do with that time? And how did he listen to the stars? And what was he taking that to? So I've been blown away from that. Go to the next one.
What is that?
Excuse me?
What's with that?
A sabbatical? What mom is doing right now? When I don't have to work every day, and but I get to do and do everything. You understand? All right, go, and then this one is, we're doing a memory museum. So I'm taking what I did with the children to collect these memories. We're gonna have some tea, do a slow sip. And I have we're gonna be working with a set of herbs that I was hoping to bring you all tonight. I do apologize, but we were painting. We have projects to do. We have National History Day. So when you come to the, if you come to this, you'll be able to see and take a slow step. I'll walk you through this experience of, allowing aromas and the taste of things, and seeing what that triggers and how it creates this collective memory. We'll work with certain scents. You'll get like a little thing of herbs, and some people will have similar ones, but it's so interesting how many herbs cross different cultures, right? And so what happened very interestingly is your hand up. Yeah.
You should ask to collaborate with the little coffee shop. I mean, the coffee and tea shop we went to in Baltimore.
Oh, to see if we can partner. That's a very good idea. I love that. I love that you know that partnership is a part of the practice, honey. You better learn it. And so we are, and actually the partner that we met at the tea shop, Mama Shauna Brown, is a psychotherapist who is going to be also, and she's a researcher, she's a priestess, and she's going to also work with me in setting this ritual space. And so one of the most beautiful things that an event that I had was that when a man had came, he was writing his story in this plate, and he was telling the story of how his family did this anchovy spaghetti, and his last name was like Don. I said, well, you with a recipe like a anchovy spaghetti sauce, I'm sure your last name has a little bit more to it. So he talked about how when his family came over from Italy, how they cut off the end of their last name. And the process of becoming white in America meant leaving their Italian traditions and leaving the smells of garlic, leaving the smells of some of the food, having to literally wash themselves of that. So there's this interesting thing that happens with across cultures before people, whatever generation their family had decided to assimilate, right? Before that, there's so much connectivity between how people cooked, how people fed themselves, how people gardened. And what happened in Western society, once the Black body became commodified, it also required that whiteness meant a stripping of your whole entire ancestral lineage that actually tied people across the world. That's a whole nother project, but we'll get into that. So we'll have a slow step, and then the next one, go ahead,
I remember that meeting.
is the making of fertile ground. 11th generation farmer, founder of agriculture, Michael Carter. Mr. Michael Carter is here today. And we're going to get into soil. We're going to geek out on making soil. When I tell you, like, you know, he had made this comment, he said, I don't really get to talk about it. I mean, it's really complicated. You know, it's got this, I don't get to talk about it. It's like, listen, we're going to geek out. I need you to give me the details, get into the language. So he's going to really break down, like, the science behind making soil, right? And like, what is it, what do we have to learn about the microcosm that soil is, and how we can pull that into our relationships with healing? And what does it also mean to make fertile ground within yourself, right? Because my practice is about seeing yourself inside of everything, even the soil. So what are we supposed to learn from that? So we're gonna do that. What's the next one? And then we're gonna do a seated affirmation practice. And this is where you guys get involved if you want to. You can follow me on social media at the Family Arts Museum or Mēlani in Douglas. Starting March 1st, I'm going to be calling for people to send me affirmations. You can make an affirmation on your page, tag me in it. I'll print up the affirmations on recycled paper, and we're gonna make paper. We're gonna print them out, and all the affirmations will be all together. We're gonna have big old buckets of paper. The Curative Collective Tweens will be assisting in making some paper, and Mr. Michael Carter is providing some seeds that'll be a part of the paper. We're gonna seed the paper. And so your affirmations can be inside of this paper. And when at the event that we're doing, we're gonna take the paper and people are gonna be able to write an affirmation on it and take it home and plant it into their own gardens. And so, and see what they get. Go to the next one, I think that's,
I was thinking like you did last time.
yes, probably so, I don't know.
I did.
I'm not sure. So these are inspired from that work of when we have people bring their love stories, and that's where it's kind of coming from. So how that work continues inside of the Southwest SMCP. And this is me dancing. I like people just imagining me dancing. So you can stay in touch with me. You can email me at melanin@melanindouglas.com. My dad did name me Melanin. That's a whole other story. Or on IG at Melanin Douglas or Family Arts Museum. I wasn't expect, I talked more long, but I want to hear from you. So does anybody have questions? Do we have time?
We open it to the virtual audience too.
Sure, yes, to the virtual audience as well. Does anyone have a question, or just even want to say anything, or just, where did you see yourself inside of this talk?
Well, I can, I guess, kick it off. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's just really interesting for me as the curator to listen to your insight, and for you to just really hit like every salient point, I think, of the exhibition, and to know how much you just really identified with the work, and then the connections that are in your current practice with the work, and then also the artists themselves, I think that are here, like I was sort of spying Katie's like excitement about and like planting these seeds and fertile ground and all of the analogies that I think that you're presenting, and how there is, we're sort of making a joke about the word juxtaposition, right? Or like double meanings to things, and that you really kind of understood some of the more abstract ideas, at least I was coming from and still working through. So it's just like really great to sit through your presentation and be like, okay, that it makes sense, that's connected, and for you to present past work, I think is really important to show, for me, especially in this exhibition, that this is not a new concept or a new conversation, even though we're presenting new work and it's contemporary artists, And we do have this different perspective of going through a pandemic, coming out the side of it, thinking about rest, but that as an artistic practice, working through like, what does rest mean, has been this like, centuries long conversation that we're sort of joining. So I just really appreciate that, and some of the things you said like really hit home with me, so I'm very thankful for
Thank you.
your insight.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun just to work with this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and it's like, I understand that a lot of us, I think, in DCRC, and like we've known each other for a few years now. But I think a lot of our contemporaries are arriving at this kind of point of taking the rest that they need, but also like thinking about it within their practice. And what are they going to work towards, like in their either regular institutional job, like at a museum or whatever it might be, or taking it on into their personal practice. I've seen more women curators have independent projects outside of their 9 to 5
Yeah.
that is really enriching, I think, like a different side of them. And I'm having that experience too with this show. And not just being at home, in the height of the pandemic, unemployed, being like, oh, I'm, giving into rest. Okay, I'm doing this. This is what I've been missing. And now I'm at this other side where I'm back to working full time. And I'm thinking, okay, you have to really incorporate the rest into your life and have this outside source
Mm,
for the rest.
Mhm.
So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I can have to, I really love what you did, that was really cool.
Say a little bit louder, but there's a fan right there. No, don't apologize. There's a fan.
I thought it was really cool, like how you incorporated art in like a place that we normally not really read like that.
Yeah.
And then I was wondering when you started like working in herbalism.
Oh, I don't remember not. So when I became aware of it more was probably when I was pregnant. That's when it became more, no, actually no, like about 18, 19, when I got my first apartment. And, thank you for this question, because it actually makes me think about it. But in my room, in my apartment, 19, every room had a different scent according to what I want to happen in that room. So my bedroom had cinnamon and rose, and sometimes lavender. My office had bergamot and geranium, sometimes rosemary. And so each room, I was very serious about curating the smell of everything. I mean, how your 19-year-old doing this. Also, my students will tell you, like, the things we would do, I mean, they could bring anything back into that classroom and we would try to figure it out. This is before you could just take a picture of something and, you know what I'm saying, so we would be encyclopedias trying to figure out what this thing was, if they had an interest in it. So, and then also with them, when they came in, they didn't know that I was working some magic on them, but if it got too hot, oh, trust me, it was gonna be some lavender sprayed around that room. Being able to, or if they came in and they were sleepy, then I had certain smells that would lift them up. If they felt sad, I had certain sense that there was a sense of sadness in the room. If I knew that a student was going through something, I mean, I would do things like I'd be over their desk a little bit more, but they didn't know that my whole little arm was scented with a, scent that was going to help them, because I knew they were going through something. And, I do the same thing with my daughter. But yeah, it was a huge part of like that practice as a teacher. But I do remember with my grandmother, there's certain things that she did. I remember how she would put, we had to take the eggshells out into the soil. We had an herb that we would put in like a white liquor or something before we would put it around the house. You had to put cayenne on certain things. I mean, so there was these. Sometimes you're already in it, and what I encourage you to do is not that, don't don't wait for the world to certify you. So what that means is that there's this thing that says, I'm a certified herbalist, I'm a certified artist, and I'm a graduate, and da-da-da. No, don't wait for that, right? Have whatever practice you want, whatever interests you, start with maybe get a little case of mason jars, the 4-ounce one. Go to a bulk store, or go to and fill them up with some herbs and just research them. If I had the YouTube at your age, man, y'all don't know what we had to go through to get some of these things. The Dewey Decimal System of classification is real. So I hope that answered your question. Good. Anyway, is there any question from the line or anything? Okay.
There's no questions on the Zoom, but there are a few comments that my staff is sharing with me. Britt Kofa, one of the artists in the show, who's isolated from us right here in the corner, was commented, "So beautiful. I'm tuning in from my car. I pulled over to the side of the road and started tearing up." This is early on in the presentation. She also agreed that she'd rather be unkempt than unknown to herself.
That's right.
And Jessica Flores is also on the Zoom. It just says, "Hey." Yeah, few of her main comments in the chat.
Good.
If I may, it's worth the drive to Rockville, Maryland. I did it in rush hour with a 3.5-year-old. So do it. I was in, and if you can't make it, there's a virtual artist talk on Tuesday. Which is just amazing.
Please go. We're going tomorrow. Then I'm going back. I'm taking her friends. It's just, if you can get out there, make sure you can get out there. Any other questions or any comments, anything?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing by bringing all the memories and all the stories that coexist very. So as an immigrant myself, I brought all my stories with me in my own name and testimonies, but absolutely had to learn another way to to present them and to make them accepted. And I think art really helps us to create this. I love the best. So I love it. I love using the 5 sense.
Yeah.
To relate to everyone. Our family. So it's a way for us to connect with our past and also to bring the
Thank you for sharing that. It's so important for us to really learn who did we become? Why did we become this way? Very good. And what is this society asking you to do? Like really, what are you being asked to do? And not only what were you asked to do, what were people before you asked to do? It's not often talked about, but I forget the percentage of Polish and Italian immigrants who went back home. They were like, yeah, we're not doing this. They were like, no, we are not. I walk in, you're offended, I'm good. And so people make it seem like people came to this country with this just excitement. It has not been always historically exciting. Or this excitement that if you decide to be in one group versus another, or whatever, that there'll be something for you, but at what cost? What are people asking you to do? And how do you make sure you determine what your practice will be? And that's why the Family Arts Museum to me is so important, because everyone has a museum and everyone has an art practice. Your life is your art practice. What you decide to cook. And this last year, I had an unbelievable traumatic situation happen, and I lost my sense of taste. My daughter's like, the food is salty, the food is salty. And I'm like, baby, I don't know, I'm so sorry. But we don't know how much this trauma has impacted even our ability to smell, to taste. And what is this world asking you to do? And is it worth it? And if you decide that it's not worth it, you need to get a reparative art action plan for your family, and you need to make some decisions you know, and curate your kitchen and your space and your home to bring you to what you are deciding is going to be normal for you in your household and your family and your friends. Create another world, because this one is not designed for us to survive a certain way. Us thinking that we're separate, of course, people want to think that we're separate. I mean, because if we're not in community, there's like, everybody's house got 18 eggs. Well, everybody don't need 18 eggs, but you might want to come borrow some eggs from me. But if you're not borrowing eggs, they're selling more eggs, right? Or everybody's got, 4 refrigerators. Like, we're not, people make money off of our division, a lot of money. And I promise you, it's not us. And I mean all the us's, okay? Let's be clear, okay? There's a lot of us's to talk about, but I'm talking about all the us's. So it's beautiful that you bring your family's tradition inside of that and make sure and don't be crazy. Be that woman in that picture who looks unkept, but she knows who she is. My father told me a story of how he grew up in Appalachia and up in the mountains in Pennsylvania, the tip of Appalachia, and how when the Italian, the Polish, and the German immigrants, how they were so rejected, right? Like, because let's not act like everybody came here and immediately was accepted. There was a process. Every generation, somebody will be considered as white. And one of the things that happened is that they would smell a certain way because of how their food, and they had their traditions. You smell like food, like you smell like you actually. And there are literally books. There's one book called Perfection Salad. You should look that one up. That was about getting families and getting American society to create all white food, literally. To have the food, not just, I'm not saying white people, I'm talking about the food, literally white. Everything on your entire plate is white. As a way, because they felt that the spices, the herbs, was activating the more uncivilized part of you. What? So ask yourself, look at your family's history and see, is there something else for me to experience? Look at your family's recipe, like your recipe. Find out, when did it go from tomatoes from the garden to canned tomatoes to canned tomato sauce? What was that journey in your family? And see where you can kind of catch yourself. And you'd be surprised, those decisions, what happens at the kitchen table, people are either living and dying right there. Your history is living and dying right in the kitchen. And this is a place you can actually do something about, So thank you for saying that.
Okay, any other questions for Melanie? Thank you so much.